Okay, let's do this. So, I have tried to tell this story in the past before. It was actually one of my first videos on YouTube back in 2020. I posted my getting pregnant at 17 story. And to be honest, that video is privated now because it was not the best put together. I didn't do a great job at telling the story. I was very nervous. I was, 19, exhausted, lack of sleep due to having an infant. But here we are, 2 years later, retelling the story. So yeah, hi, my name is Izzy, aka Always Cringy, and I got pregnant at 17. This is my story. Let's go! Okay, so I'm first gonna get into it on how I met my son's father. Let's go way back to 2016. I was a freshman in high school, and about a month into freshman year, so sometime between mid and late September of 2016, was the first time I saw my son's father. At the time, I was an emo kid slash scene kid. Therefore, my type was definitely emo guys. Like, the guys who had the eyeliner, the chains, the bracelets, the jackets. You know the type. Johnny Gilbert, basically. I hope y'all remember who Johnny Gilbert is slash was in my digital escape, because if not, then you're not gonna know what the heck I'm talking about. But yes, he was very much my type, but I experienced something new with him. I could not talk to him. I was so nervous, which had never been a thing for me when it came to a guy. I never felt this urge to know someone, but was too scared to even try to start a conversation with them. Little did I know he was my first actual crush. Even though I had boyfriends before, I wasn't really into them. I would just date them because I was bored and, that's pretty much it. But yeah, the first time I saw him, he was very handsome and just everything I could ever imagine for my dream guy. Fast forward about 8 to 9 months to May of 2017, we are at the end of our freshman year. A mutual friend introduces us. My friend, who we'll call A, no, not Pretty Little Liars, but my friend A, he happened to be friends with this guy, and he introduced us, and right away, we clicked and we both were feeling each other, but we're still too nervous to talk to each other. Eventually, over the course of the next few weeks after that, we started talking. He got my Snapchat, and we started talking all the time when I was supposed to be studying for finals, but then I cut him off. I was in a really toxic relationship at this time. I'm not gonna go into too many details, this is not the video for that, but basically, I realized I had feelings for this boy who I gave my Snapchat to while I was dating someone else. I'm not the kind to cheat. I am not the one to, disrespect my significant other no matter how they treat me. That's just not me, I'm not a cheater. Therefore, before cutting him off, I actually did try to break up with my significant other, but as toxic significant others do, they guilt you back in. I ended up cutting this boy off for 3 months. At the end of the summer, I was going through a lot of stuff. I was actually on the verge of unaliving myself, and my son's father randomly just started texting me. It ended up resulting in us talking in secret for a couple weeks, but I eventually came clean to my parents and my significant other. Eventually got out of that relationship because my eyes were a little bit more open on how I should be treated versus how I shouldn't be treated. So I left him, I broke up with him. I never cheated. I'm just going to make that clear right now. I never cheated, I never got into another relationship, I never kissed another guy, none of that. So anyways, by this point when my son's father and I reconnected, it is August of 2017, almost an entire year after the first time I saw him. By this point, he had moved. During this time, I was living in Nevada and he had moved back to Southern California where he was originally from. So we ended up forming a long-distance friendship. About a month into us talking, we finally came clean that I had feelings for him, he had feelings for me. We both had a lot in common. It wasn't just, a visual attraction at this point. It was wow, I'm into you as a person as well. Because there was the distance and we didn't know if we could necessarily handle long distance at that point, we agreed to just be long distance best friends. That didn't last long. In November of 2017, he ended up coming out to visit because he did have family in Nevada. And on his first night there, he kissed me under the stars. We were a thing, we were official. We spent the next 2 weeks having a bunch of fun, and then he went back home and we ended up starting a long distance relationship. Over the course of the next year and a half, we would see each other as much as possible. During that year and a half, I ended up moving to Northern California. He ended up going for his GED because he hated high school. I ended up graduating early during that time, and basically over the course until I did graduate, he would either fly out to see me or I would either fly out to see him, and this was in, a once every 2 to 3 months occurrence. We'd stay with each other for a couple weeks to upwards to a month. And then that led us to June of 2019. June of 2019, I was finally graduating. Graduated a year early, and he surprised me. I was not expecting him to come out because, you know, flights are expensive and he was working part-time at a sandwich shop, but he managed to save up enough to come and see me for my graduation. After my graduation, we ended up driving with my grandparents from Northern California, where I lived, to Nevada, where they lived and his family lived, and he ended up staying the night with me at my grandparents. That night, we did end up making love, and then 3 days later, he went home. Granted, this wasn't really a big deal, him going home, because I had planned on staying in Nevada for 3 weeks to visit with my friends and family there, and then flying out to where he lived. So it wasn't that big of a deal that I wasn't going to see him for 3 weeks because I knew I was going to get the whole summer with him. Little did I know at the time that that whole summer would turn into the rest of my life with him. 5 days before I was supposed to fly out to Arizona, I realized I was late. Therefore, I took a pregnancy test. It popped positive. I immediately started spam texting my son's father. And just to reiterate, this was at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was asleep. He had work at like 8 o'clock the next morning, and I'm texting him, freaking out. I eventually calmed down. 8 o'clock in the morning hits, and I get a text from him. I immediately wake up, and all it said was, "Is this a joke?" I said, "No." He's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, and nobody's laughing, like, this is a joke, this is real. So he said, "All right, well, I'll call you when I'm off of work and we'll figure out what we're gonna do." At this point, we were both still 17. I was not going to be turning 18 for like another 3 weeks. He was not going to be turning 18 for like another 6 months by this point. This was kind of scary. He ended up calling me that night. He was in full-blown panic attack. Granted, I had already had previous plans to hang out with his sister that night. So she's sitting in my bedroom hanging out because his sister and I are really good friends. I'm over in the guest bedroom trying to calm him down. He was terrified. I think a lot of his fear was, yes, from the fact that he was going to be a dad at 17, but his family's also a little hardcore. They are very Christian, which nowadays so are we. But his fear at the time was that he was not going to be able to see his son or I because we made love out of wedlock. Clearly not the case, but that was one of his fears at the time. So anyways, he ends up telling his family, just his aunt and uncle who he was living with, his guardians. We agreed not to tell anybody else. And right after we made that agreement, his sister found my test when she was looking for deodorant in my bathroom. I know you're watching this. So anyways, she comes in, she's really happy about being an auntie. And overall, it was an exciting but scary night. I'd end up picking 2 names that night. I'm not going to say our girl name publicly, but we picked a girl name and we picked a boy name. Ezra was the boy name. 5 days later, I ended up packing everything up, still not telling my family that I'm pregnant. I was scared they weren't gonna let me go be with my child's father. And I flew out to Arizona. His aunt ended up taking me to a pregnancy center to get it confirmed. We then kind of sat down and had to think, like, are we gonna go for adoption? Are we gonna keep the baby? We ultimately decided to keep the baby. It was by that point that his aunt and uncle helped me get my state ID, and then they also helped me go and get a job. They also helped me find roommates. They didn't think it was right for us to be living under the same roof, whether I was pregnant or not. That was their beliefs. I wasn't going to challenge it. It was their house. As for my family, after I was officially 18 and had, everything situated, I did tell them. I told my mom, my dad, my bonus dad, my grandparents, everybody. My family was all really supportive. They told me if I needed anything or if I ever needed to come back home for no reason, their doors were always open. So yeah, my family overall was really supportive. They actually helped me a lot financially during my pregnancy and even after my baby was here. It was really nice because being such a young mom was definitely really hard. Me living with roommates and working during my pregnancy did not last long. 2 months into living with roommates, so I was about 3 to 4 months pregnant by this point, I found out some stuff about my roommates. Very illegal stuff. One of them was on the sex offender registry. Another one was a convict and a heroin addict. I forgot what the other person did, but basically they were all convicts. Me being pregnant and freshly 18, my son's father and uncle, they got their guest room prepared and let me move back in with them and stay in the guest room. We were still not allowed to sleep in the same room. We weren't married. About a month after I moved back in with them, pregnancy became very high risk. And the reason my pregnancy became high risk was due to high levels of stress. I'm not gonna lie, his family was really stressful to live with. So my body kept trying to force itself into labor. I was under so much stress all the time, which that amount of stress is not good during pregnancy. I was ultimately put on bed rest. I could not go to work. and that's how it went until my kid was born. Once February 2020 rolled around, my son's father proposed to me. He wanted to propose to me a lot earlier, but I was not ready for that. By that point I was, so I said yes. 9 days later, we ended up getting married on February 12th of 2020. No, we did not get engaged and married due to just the fact we were having a baby. That was always the plan. We always had planned to, get married at some point. We just decided we wanted to be married before the baby was here. We went ahead and got married. The very next day after we got married, on February 13th, I went into labor in the late afternoon. I went to the hospital. They said I was at a 4, so they had me walk around to make sure I was progressing. I was not progressing quick enough for their liking, so they sent me home. And the following day, on the 14th, we went back. I was at a 6. They went ahead and admitted me. They admitted me around 6 p.m. on February 14th, 2020. I still was not progressing fast enough for their liking, but I was so far along they didn't want to let me go home. So they kept trying to pressure me to break my water. I told them no. I was very adamant I did not want a Valentine's Day baby. And then around 11 o'clock that night, I finally agreed to let them break my water. By that point, if they broke my water, it was 11 p.m. We had 1 hour of Valentine's Day left. My son was not going to be there by that point. Went ahead and let them break my water. By that point, contractions started hitting back to back to back. At that point, I had been in labor for about 30-ish hours, like 30 to 31. And then once I hit the 33-hour mark, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning on February 15th, my body started giving out. I was in labor for 33 hours. I had not slept. Like this baby boy was just not wanting to come out. And it was because my body was giving out, they decided to give me a medically necessary epidural, and they ended up having to give me the C-section strength because for whatever reason, the normal dosage was not working for me. So they gave me a C-section epidural, and then they just decided to cut it like 30 minutes before I had to push. I got a good relief for about an hour and a half, and then around 2:30 a.m. on February 15th, they told me it was time to push. I pushed for about 20 minutes, and then at 2:50 a.m. on February 15th, 2020, my son was here. It was an emotional moment. We were so excited he was here. And yeah, it was just honestly a really amazing thing. So that is pretty much it on like my pregnant at 17. I will give you guys a little summary of where we're at now. My son's father and I are still married. I am a senior in college, and my son's father graduated college this past year. We're no longer in Arizona. We actually live in Florida now with my parents. Did live on our own for about 2 years, from summer 2020 to this summer. Because the economy ultimately just sucks right now and it's very difficult to live on your own, and the fact that my husband has student debt, we figured it's best to live with my parents until I finish school. That way it gives us time to pay off debt and we have more income, so when we do move out, we're not, living paycheck to paycheck. So that's why we're living here, to save a little bit of money. But yeah, we're still happily married. We still got a bunch of goals. Our son is now almost 3, which I will go get him. This is Ezra, my little boy. He is almost 3 years old. He is amazing and sweet and smart. My little stinker butt. I love him with all my heart, and I would not change a thing. But yes, that is it for my pregnant at 17 story time. It's definitely been a roller coaster, but I would not change a thing. We're still on that roller coaster ride, but it'll come to an end very soon. We're definitely on the path to success when it comes to our family. All we're waiting on is for me to finish school next year, and we'll be there. That is it for today's video. I love you guys, and I will see you next time.